Hi everyone, it's Ren here. Good to see you guys. I hope you're well today. Today we're going to be talking about the INFJ's relationship to their body, and more specifically how to be in touch with your body as much as possible given the challenges of inferior sensation. I'll be trying to offer an interpretation that is not usually given, something that seeks to proffer a different perspective. Before I do this, just to remind you that in fact a lot of what I'm going to be talking about in this video is discussed, especially in chapter 4 of this book right here, The Ecstatic Soul, the most in-depth investigation of the INFJ you can find online. I wrote it. It's selling quite well. We just passed 400 copies. Reviews are really good. Feedback is excellent. Paperback and ebook format available at all the links, all the Amazon links to all the countries in the description box down below. Any question, you ask me. So, what do we usually hear about the NI dominance relationship to their body? What we hear most of the time is that NI dominants have what are called out-of-body experiences. Now, when you read that NI dominants experience out-of-body phenomena, this is not meant to indicate anything remotely similar to purported near-death experiences or what some people experience when they take drugs, such as hard drugs like ketamine, for example, is supposed to give the user an out-of-body experience. So the out-of-body experience of NI dominance is not like that. I mean, I can only speak from an INFJ's perspective in this case, but I'm assuming that the INTJ, being also an NI dominant and SE and fear, experiences something similar. So an out-of-body experience for the INFJ is something that is not felt physically. I think that to call it a physical sensation is to go a little bit too far, is to make the thing experience concrete where it's not as concrete as that. So again, whereas maybe drug users or people who experience near-death situations might have the physical sensation of being out of body, that's not what happens with the INFJ. What happens is something that, a word I like to use a lot in this book, is existential. It's something that takes place at an existential level. To get the sense or the meaning of existential in this case, just consider a similar sort of analogy with the feeling of anxiety, which is not being anxious or stressed about any particular situation, not about your workplace, not about something that's going on in your family or a particular kind of ongoing conflict with a friend. An existential kind of condition is something that, like anxiety directed at life in general or existence, this mild feeling of unease with just being out there. It's something that Sartre, the philosopher and novelist Sartre, describes in some of his novels as this experience of like being hyper focused, and as if you become suddenly aware that everything around you is strange and foreign. You look at different objects, you look at people, and you just think everything looks really alien and really strange. Sometimes it can happen with words and the sound of words as well. So anything that is traditionally taken to have meaning is suddenly divested of that meaning, and the meaning itself is seen for what it is, which is an arbitrary convention, something that holds together because we consider that it holds together. Without us committing to the belief that it holds together, it would not be there, nothing would be held together. And when that recognition kind of breaks out at the surface, that's where the existential anxiety comes in, and the existential sense of being out of body is similar for the NI dominant, and so for the INFJ. It's just this weird sensation, and again, sensation is not quite the right word, but I don't know what else to use. Perhaps a feeling is also kind of too concrete. You get what I mean? Like, there are no appropriate words except an existential condition where you just never quite feel as if you belong in your body, essentially, and that you're somewhere else. You're somewhere just a little outside, and you're always interacting with people as if you're sort of looking at yourself from the outside, not on occasion, but pretty much all the time. And one of the direct consequences of this is not feeling very comfortable in your body. Your body is as if a foreign object that you have to kind of try to fit in, whatever you are, whether you're a soul or a self or some other entity. Your body is something that you try to fit in, a mold that you try to espouse, rather than who you are in the most organic fashion. And a lot of the time what you read online is that the ideal way to deal with this kind of body alienness, this feeling of disembodiment, or this experience of disembodiment, is to engage in physical activity, sensory activity, whether it might be sports, exercise of all kinds, walks in nature, plastic arts, painting, this kind of thing. Anything that gets you involved and in touch with the domain of the sensory, the domain of the sensual, in a sense. I want to suggest that this is, it's not as such bad advice, because it's always useful when you're a non-sensor, when you're someone who tends to be in your thoughts a little too much, or at least too much for your own good at times. You overthink, maybe you're a bit neurotic, maybe you have difficulties putting an end to your trains of thought where it might be warranted to put an end to them. To try to be as aware of your surroundings and of your physical activity and your bodily activity as much as possible. To ground yourself in the physical and in the sensory is obviously it's a good idea. But what I would like to counter is that this kind of advice will help you ground you more with the physical world around you in some way, but it will not offer a lasting solution to the experience of disembodiment. And the reason, in view of what I've just been talking about, is quite simple. If the experience of disembodiment or out-of-body phenomenon is not really something that could be described as physical, but more as existential, it's not by means of a purely physical activity, an activity that aims to make you confront the physical world in as unmediated a fashion as possible, that you will resolve the existential problem. In a way, an existential problem, an existential challenge, is to be met by an existential solution, and therefore an existential kind of activity, if that exists. From this perspective, an existential activity is precisely a perspective. In other words, to modify the possible variables of your experiencing of things, the key is really to manage to shift your perspective, not just your perspective on a single event or a single thing, but your perspective on life and the meaning of life, what you want to do in your life, and what value you put on the various things and people in your life. And from this perspective, I think that the solution to disembodiment for INFJs, so the solution could be called embodiment. This is what I call it in chapter 4 of my book. It's something that's going to have to do with your way of life in general, not with a specific activity. Again, a physical activity, a sensory activity, plastic art. They're going to help you be maybe in the moment a little bit while you're doing them. It's going to give you a sense of grounding. You're going to at least stop thinking, ideally. Not everyone manages that, but ideally stop thinking at least whilst you're engaged in them. But as soon as you're done, you go back home. You know, if you don't have the kind of lifestyle that suits embodiment and is an existential phenomenon, you're going to fall back straight into the out-of-body / disembodiment experience. So what is needed is really a change of perspective on how you think of your life, and not just how you think of your life, but how you live your life, how you lead your life. In the first 3 chapters of the Ecstatic Soul, my book right there, I try to excavate the problems, other existential aspects of the INFJ consciousness, of what I call alienation, haziness, and anxious prescience. So alienation, being removed from your data gathering in the external world because of inferiority. Haziness, not being able to conceive of yourself in the subject by perception alone. and anxious prescience, the difficulty of having to deal with NI insights that are not immediately susceptible, at least for some of them, of being translated into comprehensible sentences, thoughts to share with other people, and therefore always the temptation not to share them and to stay with them and not allow them to have the life that they deserve in some sense, and to develop the potential that they always had in the first place if you'd allowed them to float into the world of social interaction. So I explained that in order to move to an existentially fulfilling mode of existence, the key lies also in your use of the cognitive functions, which brings me back to Carl Jung, which brings me back to Myers-Briggs, the use of NI, the use of FE, use of TI, use of SE. But what I want to emphasize is that because NI, FE, and TI are essentially your only real reliable conscious functions, ideally in the case of TI, it can be made conscious most of the time, not all the time, less often than FE and less often than NI, but TI, especially as you get a bit older, admits more of conscious control. These are really the functions that you have influence over. You can't really have a massive amount of influence over the SE function. And that's, again, partly why advice to engage in physical activity, although good, should not be understood to mean that this will be the kind of activity where you can engage conscious SE above other functions. It's simply not possible. So the key lies in a conscious use of your cognitive functions in such a way that it leads to existential fulfillment. A function is cognitively fulfilled just insofar as it is used. A function is not existentially fulfilled only insofar as it is used. It has to be used in such a way that it will lead you to internal quietude. I discuss these topics in my book, but let's just say that if you manage to resolve alienation into world belonging, if you manage to resolve haziness into clarity, and if you manage to resolve anxious prescience into a vocation to make your NI insights known to the world through a process of collaboration with other people, this not only means that you're using your functions, the functions that you have influence over, cognitively in an adequate manner, but you're also using them in an existentially adequate manner. But notice that when it comes to SE, because SE is the first chain in the link of cognition, and also in the first chain and the first link in the chain of behavior, it is logically prior to NI, which in turn is logically prior to FE and TI. TI is actually prior to FE. So this means that if you're able to use NI, FE, and TI in an existentially fulfilling manner, it's necessarily a prerequisite that you're also using SE in an existentially fulfilling manner, even though you're doing it unconsciously. In other words, your three main functions are the indirect path to the existentially fulfilling use of SE. It's not something you'll ever get to feel very directly, but you'll see its benefits in the long run by internal peace of mind and the impression, the feeling that you are in control and of your insights, of your body, and of the kind of meaning that you want to give to your life. And the further implication is that if you are able to use your cognitive functions in an existentially fulfilling manner, then it necessarily follows that SE will also be used in an existentially fulfilling manner, which means that the challenge offered by disembodiment associated with inferior SE is primarily not to be addressed by engaging in physical sport activity, entertaining activity in the moment. These are good things, but it's not the main way to address the problem. The main challenge is the same as for the other functions. Getting out into the world, interacting with other people, sharing the content of your insights, seeing people as your partners rather than your adversaries, not taking things too personally, not because you don't have self-esteem, not because you have overweening self-esteem, but because your perspective has shifted. The people that you're interacting with are no longer these people that you have to convince of your inner value. You're already taking this for granted because you know the challenge posed by being an NI user is something that is lifelong, it's a vocation, and the benefits of sharing your insights will accrue for yourself and others only over time. It is by engaging these other functions and engaging the social world as much as you can while preserving your introverted needs that you will become embodied. Let me know what you think in the comments, guys. Consider giving me a like and subscribing, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.